it your full-time profession, or it's just something you want to add to what you do?
That's a great question, because I would love to do this full time.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of it really is just a matter of like sponsorship and how I market it and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure a person like Joe Rogan, who has 5.6 million viewers, he's not worrying about where his money's coming from, because, well, not just that, but he has the UFC thing, and he has the comedy, and I'm sure he has, everywhere he goes, he charges some sort of fee.
Yeah.
I know that he does from listening. I listen to him. Sharonica would say religiously.
Yeah.
I listen to him religiously.
Yeah.
Just because I love good conversation, and that's the whole point of this, is having.
Yeah, that's what I've been really impressed with, is just his ability to converse on a multitude of topics.
Yeah, on everything, and I think that's what's made him so popular.
Yeah.
Is it's just a
reasonable.
Yeah.
And they're taking a hard line side on anything. He's just.
But even the sides
he has viewpoints, but he's.
What would you say? Well, because we're both Christians, and we both were raised in certain households where you do draw a hard line, right? And where is there room for? How could I put it? Where does compromise come into play? Because I wouldn't say that I compromise my convictions in saying, hey, I love all people, mm-hmm. or hey, I'm not gonna, I love immigrants and I'm an immigrant, or people of color, or whatever that looks like. I'm not. This is just warm up. I'm not gonna probably include any of this. But I'm just saying.
Well, like with their transgender conversation with him and Ben Shapiro, you could tell that he didn't agree with Ben's hardline stance on I'm not going to call a transgender man a woman or a man. I don't know how that goes
against against biology, right?
If you're born biologically a man, I'm going to call you a man. Call you a he.
Right.
And you could tell that Rogan didn't agree with that, but it's not like he was berating him or saying, "Oh, you're so wrong," or that. It was just what I respected about it was that he allowed Ben to have his opinion.
Uh-huh.
And you could tell he had an opposing opinion, and then some other subsequent videos I've watched, you could tell.
Yeah.
He does. He will call a transgender.
Yeah, he'll respect the pronoun.
He'll respect the pronoun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he wasn't argumentative on it. You could tell he was very hard, fast in his view on it,
mm-hmm.
and I respect that. And that would be greatly beneficial today if we could have that kind of dialogue,
I think
instead of the just radical just throwing other people away if they don't have your exact view.
The polarization of opinions.
Yeah.
I think that's more detrimental than somebody who's willing to compromise. Because life is all. I told Sharonica this, and we were talking about this. Like it's all about some sort of compromise. Everything is about everything. Every choice in life is about compromise, I would say. But so it's a reflection on life that if you can just have a civil conversation and say, okay, well, I don't agree with you, but let's kind of meet here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I remember, remember the. What was it? The Party of Eight or whatever. What's that senator's name from Florida? Marco Rubio, when he was trying to pass that Immigration Reform Act, and he was doing it with like 5 other Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was based, and he was just railed, like just railroaded
mm-hmm.
by the right. It's like, look, he's a traitor. I'm like, no, he's trying to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and that's like frowned upon to try to progress forward. Like your stance is not going to get anywhere. I don't want to. Well, no, I'll just say it. Your Ted Cruz Tea Party stance is not going to get you anywhere. You're just going to filibuster, and nothing's going to get done. Your left-wing Nancy Pelosi thing is the same thing. You have to come somewhere in the middle. I heard somewhere an adage that compromise is when both parties aren't happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's why Trump has been so. One of the reasons why, there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons why he's been so opposed by both hardline right and hardline left is that I think he's exposing radical sides of both parties.
Uh-huh.
And he's exposing how inept our Congress has been in getting things done, because he's getting things done so quickly.
Relatively speaking, right?
Relatively speaking, he's gone in there and he's getting things done as a businessman. From a businessman's perspective, whether you agree with him ideologically or not, he's getting things done much more quickly than our politicians have. And some of these people have been in there for 40 years. Been in there 40 years, and you're saying that a man who's been in there 2.5 years is the problem?
Right. That's a good point.
I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous. You've got people, Pelosi and Schumer and even those on the right, that they've been in there for decades. And we've been paying them.
Yeah.
And they haven't been doing anything. They've just kind of been building their own little kingdoms. And you get this guy comes in there like a bull in a china closet and china shop, and he's just getting things done right and left.
Yeah.
Things that they could have gotten done if they would have just gotten off their butts and quit arguing with each other and done something.
Right.
He's gone in there and done it. And it's just, whether you like what he's done or not, he's getting things done, and he's showing the ineptitude of those elected officials that we've had in there for decades. We need to get them out of there.
Right. Okay.
Have term limits, I think.
Yeah, I think everybody listens to the radical hot takes. And then they try to form their opinion off of that, and it's just it's intense. Like, none of us are in that room where it happens.
Yeah.
We get the little 15-second somebody snuck in a cell phone, or we get the news report, or we don't get a news report and we speculate till the cows come home, and we really don't know. For all we know, he's dealing with aliens. I mean, the crazy stuff that goes on in the White House, the secrecy that has to be maintained in order for a global superpower to just stay in existence, not just here, but across every country, which we're going to speak about China today. It's just, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
so there has to be a level of respect for the office.
Yeah. Well, there does, and there has to be an understanding that we are not privy to all the information that they're privy to. I remember at Rhema, Dad Hagen talking about that.
Rhema is the school, for those that are watching and listening. Rhema is the school that we both, I guess it's a theology. It's a college now, so it's a theological seminary, I guess.
remember him talking when he was talking about that, the scripture talks about pray for your leaders, and not sit there and criticize them, because we don't have all the information. We don't have all the information that they have. And we may not agree with their decisions, but we've got to sit there and I think we have to trust that they're making decisions that are in the best interest of the nation. They're the ones that are going to be responsible for those decisions. They're the ones that are going to, in our belief system, they're the ones that are going to be standing before God, being held accountable for those decisions that they made.
And the leadership, the higher up leadership.
We're going to be held responsible for whether or not we prayed for them, whether or not we did what he's told us to do, what God's told us
on an individual level.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be held accountable for that, but we're not going to be held accountable for the decisions that they had to make. We're not privy to all that information.
Yeah.
And just like with the him pulling back yesterday on
that was intense, right?
Yeah, that was. And
we don't know what.
I don't know. He said what his reasoning was, but we don't really know if there were other factors that came into play. I mean,
the minutia.
He said that he asked at the last minute, or this is
about the 150 people, right?
150 people that would die, and you equate that to a downed drone, and it's like, that's a tough decision to make.
Yeah, because you have hardliners in the military that would say, they shot our drone down, let's get them. But he's like, okay, so they shot our drone down, and we're going to kill 150 of their people?
Yeah.
And military hardlining supporters, because I support the military. Yeah. I'm a veteran. But they would say, no, go in and do your business. But that's you would think that the left would be like applauding that.
You think so? Yeah.
You would think that they'd be like, oh my gosh, this man used common sense.
Yeah.
He equated lives more than a $22 million drone.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
I appreciate the thought process in there. If that really was his process and really what he based the decision on, I appreciate him considering people's lives. I mean, when you can think about that and what he's been called and all the names that he's been called, it to me, it exposes his opponents, his enemies, whether they're on the right or left, because he's got enemies everywhere. People that hate him on both sides.
Yeah.
I think it exposes their motivations, because they're just trying to find, it seems like they're just trying to find anything to criticize him with. And whether the decision was right or not, or wrong, we'll see. It'll play out in the coming weeks. We'll see if it emboldens people, other countries, or if it creates an appreciation. We'll see. But I got to respect him for the consideration of human life. Because we on the right, pro-life people, we're all about the preservation of life, and so I think that should be the foremost consideration.
Yeah.
Especially because they said that some of that 150 people would be innocent people that had nothing to do with
just collateral damage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we flippantly talk about collateral damage, and
they're real people.
I don't want to be collateral damage.
Yeah, exactly. We're at a Walmart and the terrorist is in the parking lot, so they bomb the terrorist and everybody in the Walmart dies.
Yeah.
If that happened here, there'd be an outrage.
Oh, yeah.
Outrage.
Yeah.
Like we'd go to arms,
Yeah.
and then we're now blowback of that incident, which just so happens to be what people like Rand Paul and Ron Paul talk about the blowback that we've created as a country. Yeah. And so that was intense, because I'll be frank, I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not necessarily a staunch. Well, actually, I'm not a staunch Donald Trump supporter. Because of my immigrant roots and some of the things that he said initially just kind of put me off. But that I was like, wow, that was really, in my opinion, just a hot take. I was like, wow, that was a really common sense decision for me, and I respected that. I think it's probably the first time I've kind of hinted at no, let me take that back. I have respected the president, but more so than in the past. I was like, wow, okay, that was real ballsy, if I could put it that way.
I think it was probably a more difficult decision to make than just let's go on with what we plan to do.
Yeah.
I think
that's really interesting.
I've never had to make those kind of decisions, and not that I want to.
And so it comes back to job. We don't know what the information he received. Aside from that, if it was more than that, that was. And it goes kind of to the heart of the matter of this podcast, because you do have Christians and people that are religious and religiously persecuted in China. Yeah. I titled this podcast, and you know what? Let me introduce you, because we've been and then and we'll keep going. Yeah, we've been chatting at it for 10 minutes, right? We were talking the other day with some friends. I'm like, it really takes a conversation about 20 minutes to get going. So I think we started recording halfway through the conversation. So we'll see what I can salvage from the edit. But yeah, Neal Donop, thank you so much for being here. You're my first special guest, so I'm
honored,
stoked, and excited that you're on the Lion's Den podcast. And we started talking it was just, we say hi to each other in the hallway at we both go to the same church, and or we frequent the same church. And we just started talking about your history in China, and I thought about 2/3 of the way into the conversation, I was like, oh my God, this is so relevant. And I think people need to hear, a firsthand account, or whatever you can tell us about your history with China, and we'll go into that. So, Neal, thank you again so much for being here. Tell the audience a little bit about what you've done in the past with your involvement in China.
I appreciate you having me as your first guest. It's quite an honor. So,
yay!
I hope and pray that this goes really well for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Blows up.
Yeah.
And I'm not the technology guy. I appreciate it, but I don't know much about all this stuff. But I let me go back. I started in college at Oral Roberts University and went on a summer trip in the summer of 1990 to Beijing. and to northeastern China to a city called Changchun, which is the city that the Japanese exiled the last emperor to. That's where
During World War
Puyi-
II?
During World War II, that's where Puyi was exiled to, and that's where that's where they had set up that Manchu government,
Okay.
the puppet regime that the Japanese set up during World War II. And so we went in there and we taught English at one of the local colleges, and of course toured Beijing. And of course, 1990, that was 1 year after the Tiananmen Square massacre occurred in 1989. And I have friends who were at Tiananmen Square 4 days before the tanks rolled in.
You have friends that were there.
Yeah, the summer before, very very close friends of mine. In fact, our host family, excuse me, our host family in Changchun were the team leaders who had been with that ORU team the summer of 1989, had been talking with and sharing with. They were sharing the gospel with the students, the student protesters there in 1989. They were there like on June the 1st, and then the tanks rolled in on June the 4th. And they had already gone on up to Changchun, but they were our host family. And so I've known them for the last almost 30 years now, and they were there just before all that happened, and then they had to make their way down to Hong Kong later because there were protests all over the country during that time. It wasn't just in Beijing. The biggest ones, the televised ones, were there, but there were actually ones at the campus that we were at. And so that summer of 1990, when I was there, it was still a very heightened, tense situation.
So it's still hotbed
Yeah.
of political action, or
Just absolute control. They had completely shut down any kind of protest or demonstration. I mean, when we got there, excuse me, when we got there, we flew into Beijing, and at that time, there weren't that many flights going into China because of the backlash from that action. It had kind of really blacklisted China for a few years.
and so foreign countries had said, no, don't go there.
Yeah, and it was still considered a dangerous place to go and kind of unpredictable. And so we landed all of the flights, at least all the flights that I was a part of. They landed at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you'd fly in in darkness.
Wow.
And there wasn't a capital airport highway. There was just a 2-lane road there was a tree-lined road. And we get there, you get into the airport, and there's guys with machine guns. This is just 1 year after Tiananmen Square happened, and we got there end of May, and so we were there during the anniversary of that first year, which was June the 4th. And so they were trying to make sure that nobody was going to have any kind of demonstrations or any kind of uprising on that. So everything was very, very tense, very, very tight. You go to Tiananmen Square, and that's where it had happened. Of course, they had cleaned it up, but you could see off. There's this large museum building to the east of the square, and you could see in between the columns of that building, you could see the soldiers there just kind of watching, and just ready, just waiting if anything was to happen.
Wow. We don't understand that level of control here in the United States. I think the closest that we've gotten to, and I wasn't, I don't remember when they were, but it was in the 70s were the Berkeley riots. When they deployed the National Guard, and maybe in the 60s when they deployed National Guards in states for civil riot protests and or civil liberties protests and things like that. That's about as close as we maybe have gotten, and we don't understand that.
Was it the Kent State or the students were killed at, I think it was Kent State or Wayne State. I think it was Kent State. But that was in the 60s. Before.
Was that 60s?
I was born in 68, and it may have happened around that time. But yeah, there were several students that were killed during some riots there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have that level of control.
Yeah, it's something to be said about our wonderful Constitution, and there's something to be said about the liberties that we have. A lot of I remember seeing some people talking about, that the Constitution is irrelevant, but then you look at things like that, and it's like, no, it's not. Like, the Constitution protects us from that.
Yeah.
Protects us from that level of government tyranny, because that's essentially what it kind of boils down to, some sort of control. I don't know. There's a lot of smarter people than I that talk about the system, the economic system of China, and maybe, I don't know how much you know about that, but I don't know. It just doesn't resonate with people. Like, you don't understand how good we have it. And even in some of my poorest states with my family, I'm still among the richest in the world.
Yeah.
Making, $30,000 or $40,000 a year, which is really low mid class here, is rich, and even in Mexico or any other country.
You're wealthier than probably 4 billion people, at least.
Yeah, at least.
You're wealthier than probably 60 to 70% of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
There's people that, and we'll get to this later, but there's people that we work with, that we help with my charity, that they're living on $300 to $500 a year. That's all.
$300 to $500. It took me a second. It took a second to register.
Not a month, a year.
$300 to $500 a year.
Yeah.
And these are people in China.
China, Vietnam, Southeast Asia. There's
That's
Africa's a similar thing.
Okay, so we're a musical family. We love the arts, and I rewatched Miss Saigon.
Okay.
And it's really, really powerful musical. I forgot how powerful it was.
Yeah.
And the blowback that we created there with the Bui Doi and the children of American GIs being left in Vietnam, and created an orphan crisis in Vietnam. But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But there's still $300 to $500 a year. I want to say, I keep wanting to say month, but it's a year.
It's a year. Yeah.
These two microphones cost $500.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at, I can't remember the statistics, but there was statistics. It was something like the population of the world, or 2 billion people in the world make less than $1,000 a year, or something like that. I have to go back and find that.
I just wanted, just so that the audience understands. Okay, so this microphone, this stand, this cable, this little mic pre costs more than what they make in a year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's nuts. That's insane.
And that would almost have to be considered disposable income, because you're still supporting your family.
Yeah.
How many kids you have? You have 5 kids?
5 kids.
So you're still able to support your family and buy this.
Yeah.
So... But yeah, the comparisons are just amazing. You start looking at it and you just think of the wealth of our country. But your original point, as far as the Constitution, the Constitution was written to limit the ability of the government. It was not to limit people. Mm-hmm. Throughout history, people were given rights by their rulers. And this is really the first time that the rulers said, no, we're
giving rights to the government.
It's the citizens giving rights to the government. This is what you can and cannot do. That's really what our Constitution was written for. It was to limit the government's ability to control and to take away people's rights.
For the people, of the people, for the people, by the people, right?
That's what it was.
That's a really great perspective, Neal. That's really powerful. I never thought of it that way before. So
that's what it is. We're the first country that really had a Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm. An inalienable Bill of Rights endowed by the Creator.
Yeah, that's it. All of our rights don't come from government; they come from
the ideation of the divine.
Yeah,
whatever you consider that divine, if it's first father, or if it's whatever these rights, we believe that they are originated from something outside and greater than ourselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
We say Christian. As Christians, we believe in God, Christ, Jesus.
Who endowed us with those rights, and the government should not be allowed to take those things away. And the Constitution was written in a manner to affirm those rights and to limit what the government was able to take away. And unfortunately, I don't think people really understand that these days, especially younger people I don't think they've been taught that. Even people in my generation, I'm 50 years old. I don't know that all the people in my generation have been taught that.
I'm turning 43 this year, and I've never heard that perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's important, that perspective, and it alludes, or it points to the point of this podcast and why I enjoy people like Joe Rogan and some other people, is because, where else are you going to hear that?
Yeah.
You're not going to hear it in a liberal college.
Well, growing up, I was, and this does have to do with China. I was raised to be independent, to take care of myself, to solve problems, to take responsibility for my own actions. And one of the things that really culture shock wise hit me when I moved to China. I moved to China in 1995, and I taught at the University of Aeronautics and Astronautics in Beijing, which is the top aeronautical university in the country. They design their fighter jets, their defense systems, and all of that stuff. I was not a scientist, so they didn't really worry about me. I taught English in a post-grad program. But the thing that struck me the most was how often people talked about what the government was going to do, what the government would do for them. And they were always talking about the government's role in their lives. And it's interesting. It struck me because I never thought about the government growing up. Today, I think it's in our face so much more that kids today hear about government all the time. But when I was growing up, government wasn't really even talked about. It wasn't talked about in terms of what they're going to do to help me in my life.
Or if it did, it was only during election time.
Yeah,
I think maybe.
Yeah, and the election period was far more condensed than it is now. Now
last 18 months
president just announced, and Democrats have been running for a few months. It's like, this is ridiculous. Can we just wait another 6 months, please?
Yeah.
But
I've always been of the opinion that the president should serve 1 7-year term, and that's it. Like, that's it. Then he never has to worry about, you still have the pension or whatever, whatever, we'll work those details out. But that way the president, like, for the next 18 months, he's going to be busy.
Yeah.
Campaigning.
Yeah, if at the very least he's going to be
a year.
He's going to have split, his attention's going to be split.
Yeah. And I don't think that serves the position justice, any justice, and then the constituency, the split attention, But that's right. When I think about it, I remember the Reagan-Carter election. I remember the Walter Mondale election, and I actually watched the Democratic convention when he made that I am going to charge you, I am going to raise your taxes. I was like, I was smart enough to know back then. I'm like, that was dumb, But I don't remember anything. I think the Olympics had more precedence in my life at the time. But don't think about it.
Our daily lives, we weren't thinking about what the government was going to do. I mean, there are people who live off of welfare and food stamps and things like that I guess it's more prevalent in their lives than it was back then. But most the people I grew up in New Braunfels, it was lower to middle class primarily, and we didn't sit there and think about what the government was going to do. But when I lived in China, all the time they're talking about what the government's going to do.
What would they say? Like, what would be a statement that they would say?
Well, put me on the spot here. Just having to do like with education or with their health care, the government, because it's all socialized. It's communism, but
it's
communism,
a mix
socialism. It's a mix, and so it was. The government controlled where people lived by with the hukou, which was their work unit was like their danwei, but they had a hukou, which was like their identification card. It showed where they had their citizenship.
Okay.
So if they were born in Beijing, if their family had citizenship in Beijing, then they could access the education system, the health care. They could access all the government, everything that the government provided. They provided everything at that point. Mm-hmm. It's loosened up over the last 15, 20 years. But at that point, even in the early 90s, the government still provided everything, and they still told people where they could live.
So they had districts.
So they had, they could live within that city, but as far as if you wanted to access the socialized services, if you wanted to access the schools, the health care, and all of that, you had to access it in the city that you had citizenship. So if you weren't from Beijing, but you were working in Beijing,
You couldn't get
you got
services
sick,
there.
Your kid, first of all, your kids couldn't go to those schools without you paying money. And you couldn't access those hospitals. You'd have to go back to where you were from. So
Wow.
the medical care was completely diverse based on
you're looking. Okay.
where you were from. If you're a poor farmer from out in the middle of nowhere, you had to access to health care in
Whatever
province,
whoever came back home from
wherever it
school.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you would get lousy health care. If you're from Beijing, boy, you were great. You could access the Beijing health care for free.
I'm pretty sure that created some sort of underground where people were falsifying documents saying, "Oh, we're from this area." Kind of.
Oh yeah, there's
It's a whole
lots of that.
submarket, right?
Yeah, because you had migrant workers, you had all you had migrant farmers, you had construction workers that would come into town, and they had to set up separate types of facilities for these folks if they would get hurt. But it was all, they're talking about the government. The government was involved with every aspect of their lives, the education of their kids, their health care, their access to the job market. It was all highly controlled, and the government kept tabs on all of the people. They did it back then. It was much more. I guess you could say it was much more of an analog system where they actually had paper folders with a history of everybody, of what they did. Everybody had a folder. Everybody had a history of everything that they'd ever done wrong. And it was documented. It was kept in that folder. Today, it's all done digitally. And so it's even
Which we'll talk about. That's interesting.
It's even scarier today because, you could lose a folder maybe. But yeah, I mean, everything that you'd ever done wrong from the time you were a kid up to now, when you went into a job interview, you had a folder and you had the history of your behavior.
China probably has a backup of everything in the world.
Sure they do.
Somewhere in China.
I'm sure they do.
Not talking about just Chinese citizens, but you and me.
They track everything.
They have you and me in their database somewhere, and not just one copy of you and me. Like, it's that level of, I don't even know what to call that. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's not even a conspiracy. It's a fact that their databases are all encompassing. They know when little Susie is born and when Johnny has died.
Well, and back then they did it through neighborhood watches. Basically, you would have neighborhood leaders who everybody watched each other, and you would get benefits if you caught somebody doing something wrong. You turn them in, you get a benefit from it, and they've reinstituted some of that today.
So it was no snitches get stitches thing like they do here. It's more like
occasionally snitches would get beaten up and killed, but for the most part, I mean, everybody's watching each other. But then you would have like a town, or not a town, but a little village or a little district leader who was a Communist Party leader, and everybody watched everybody. Everything was documented.
Let me put a pause on this because I really want to talk about that type of surveillance. But let me just bring it back and just close this circle real quick. So you got involved in 1990 when you went to China and you started seeing these things. What stirred in your heart to be like, you know what, this is my calling? Like what spawned that in you?
Well, it's a very religious thing, and so to take a very deep religious turn here, we were up in Changchun, and our contact guy went. He took. There were 4 guys on their team. We call our team the Gilligan's Island trip because there were 4 guys and 3 girls. So I was the captain, and because I was the team leader. But the one weekend, it was a couple who he took all of the guys and just took us on a Saturday, and we went into town. And we went to this park, and then the lady took all the girls, and they went and did something. And we were at this park, and we were at this. It was kind of funny because during World War II, we really helped China a lot to defeat
Japan, Imperial Japan,
and all. But they give all the credit to the Soviets, to the Russians. And so there's this monument in Changchun that's built in honor of the Soviet Union, and it was a.
Was it like Stalin or something?
It wasn't. It had like, I think it had like an airplane at the top. just this tall tower with an airplane at the top, and it was, but it was built in honor of the Russians' assistance in defeating Japan during World War II, and we were at that park, and there was students sitting all over the place, and our contact he saw one of his students just kind of leaning up against this monument. And so we went up and talked to him, and we're just kind of gathered around this guy and just kind of chatting with him and talking and kind of joking and playing. And
that one?
And no, that's the train station, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's. I think
what was it? What was it called? There was what was this? What's the city?
It's Changchun, Chang Chun.
Chun. Oh, here it is.
That one right there.
Wow. Okay. Here we go, everybody.
Yeah, an airplane at the top, and he was just leaning up against the base of it,
right down here.
Sitting, yeah.
So how tall is this? Like, how? So a person goes up to about what? Right here or something, or is it?
No. You'd go up to about there.
So, oh wow. So that's really big.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you would probably be this tall against it, maybe.
Right about here. Okay. All right. So that's a fairly.
So that's a fairly good sized statue.
Okay.
Monument. And anyway, he's leaning up against against the base of it there.
Uh-huh.
And we just went up and talked to him. Actually, we were up the steps at the base of the.
Right up about here. Okay.
Yeah. And so we're just, it's a Saturday. It's me. A lot of people are off, and the students are off, and we've got our backs to. Well, we're facing the monument, and we're talking to this guy, and we're just joking around and kind of happy. And you've got to realize this is a year after Tiananmen Square. So people are scared. People are afraid to say anything. People are afraid to do anything wrong. There's military everywhere. There are spies everywhere. There are people that are just plain clothes, look like students, that will come and mill around. And we would do this thing called an English corner where you can gather in a park and people just practice speaking English because, when the foreigners would show up, it's like, well, we were the first native English speakers that a lot of these students had ever talked to, and they just wanted to practice their English. But you would talk to people, and you could always kind of pick out, like, that guy just doesn't look right. And so there would be people within the crowd that were just kind of watching and monitoring and making sure, reporting back.
Their version of Men in Black.
To make sure that you weren't proselytizing or you weren't trying to stoke political, problems, or you weren't trying to do something against the government. So they're very paranoid. And so we were talking to this kid, and I say kid, he was my age. I was in college at the time, and that's something that always is kind of strange to me is to realize that the Tiananmen Square massacre happened to people my age. I mean, that was my. If I'd have been in China, I would have. I was in college.
20-year-olds, early 20s. Wow.
So I was 20. I turned 21 that year, I guess, and. So anyway, but we're talking to him, and then we finished talking to him, and most people in the park just kind of keep to themselves. You might have a couple of people, because this was a law at the time too. You couldn't have a large gathering of people unless it was approved. You couldn't have a gathering of over 11 people was considered against the law.
Wow.
The government wouldn't allow it, even if it was outside. Now, if it was a class, there was exceptions, of course. So you start to gather a group of people, and people get really nervous over there. But we were just joking around and having fun and just being typical college students.
Okay.
Messing around. And I remember we turned around. We'd said goodbye to this student. We turned around because we were going to go there was one restaurant in town that served fried chicken. And we were starved for some American food. And there was no McDonald's, no KFC, nothing like that. This is before all of that happened. All that went over there.
Before that opened up. Okay.
And we had been there for, I don't know, probably 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks at the time. And we were just craving something close to American. So he was taking us to this chicken restaurant. We're like, well, we got to go eat. And so we got to go eat some meat, because there was very little meat that you got to eat at that point as well. And we were just tired of tomatoes and eggs and tired of eggplant and all that. But and it was cafeteria food. I love Chinese food, but this was cafeteria food, and it just got to be nasty after a while. So we turned around and to go, and this crowd had formed around us. It was at least 100 people.
Oh no!
Had just kind of gathered because they saw the foreigners and they saw us. We were kind of animated, and they were just kind of looking up at us because we were up on that platform, and they're looking up at us, and it was just they had this look in their eyes like, "Why are you so happy? And can you tell me why you're happy?" That was just the message that I got. It was just like they were longing for something that we had.
Oh man.
And I felt like at that point that God called me to go back to China and to help people to know where that joy comes from.
Wow.
And that's really where I felt like, God was telling me to go back to China.
In our first podcast that I did with Sharonica, I mentioned that the look in people's eyes when you just have a conversation, because even like if let's say you couldn't meet and we did it over Skype, it's not the same. It's not, I probably wouldn't feel what I'm feeling now, the energy that I'm feeling now, the love and compassion that you have for the Chinese people.
Yeah.
When you don't see it and when you don't experience it. And so, man, I can see, because I've been to foreign missions where you could see the people's like desperation in their eyes. You can't even, people try to, some good photographers get it in pictures, but it's just something else being. So how long did you spend? How long did you spend in China? I know that when I first started working at my last job, that I think you had just come back.
Yeah, I lived in China. I moved there in 1995, and I lived there until 2011, so 16 years. And, of course, the first time I'd gone was 1990. So I've been involved with China for over 20 years. And I up until, I haven't gone back this year, but I've gone back the last couple of years, at least once, because we still have projects going on in China.
Gospel spreading
helping with orphans primarily.
Okay.
And there's a variety of things that I won't talk about on a
of course
thing like this, but I won't talk about publicly. But primarily charitable outreach that we do, and I run a charity called Legacy Charities, and we operate.
What's the website?
Well, there's legacycharities.com. Okay. We operate in China and in Vietnam also as newdaycharities.org. So it's the same organization. We just have we operate.
Make sure we get
those names.
Well, I'll get those links, and I'll make sure that I put it in the description so that people can, if they want to get involved or if they want to see more about what you guys do, that they can just go and visit, because I think overall the gospel is to free people from oppression of all kinds, obviously spiritual oppression, but by extension, even a physical oppression, an actual physical oppression.
We're working in China. We work primarily with orphans and get medical procedures done for them. We work with orphans that need medical surgical procedures done so that they can be adopted. And we've had over 350 kids adopted over the last 15, 16 years. And then we started doing projects in Vietnam about 4 years ago, and we've been doing heart surgeries for children from extremely poor families.
Wow, Neal, I didn't know.
Other surgical procedures.
That's amazing, bro.
So that's what we're focusing on, and we just got approved in Vietnam. We got our license approved to operate officially under our own license. We've been operating under another organization's license, which is legal to do, but
it's just difficult.
We went through the process of getting our own license, and so now we're able to operate under our own license in Vietnam. So we're looking to open a guest house because we work primarily in Ho Chi Minh City and bring families from the Mekong Delta and other poor areas, bring them to Ho Chi Minh City to have surgery. And they need a place to stay. The parents need a place to stay, the family that travels with them. In China, we always worked with orphans, so we didn't ever have to deal with family. In Vietnam, we're dealing with poor families, and like families that make $300 to $500 a year. And so they have to travel to Ho Chi Minh City. So we provide the travel expenses, we provide for their food and their accommodations, but we want to. The next step is to develop our own guest house, kind of like a Ronald McDonald House type thing,
and develop that throughout the country, or just one location where you're at.
Start in Ho Chi Minh City, and then we'll go from there.
All right.
And we've actually even been able to help some children from Cambodia. Brought some children from Cambodia into Ho Chi Minh City to have surgery, and so we're just that's basically what the charity does. But it's legacycharities.com or newdaycharities.org, and it'll get you to the same information.
We'll definitely put those in the description.
Oh my goodness. This is crazy. Well, no, that message that came through a little while ago, it's actually a dear Chinese friend of mine that just sent me a text. I haven't heard from her in years. She's literally a rocket scientist. She taught at the university that I taught at, but she was a jet propulsion instructor.
In China?
In China. She lives in the States now. She came here and got her doctorate.
So she texted you just out of happenstance. When was the last time you heard from her?
It's been probably 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
Wow. I don't think that's a coincidence.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. we are full believers of here in this household of divine circumstance.
Yeah. So that's I haven't just thinking about her the other day, but she is literally a rocket scientist.
That's the secret. You called it into existence.
Here's the thing. This little side note is kind of funny that when I was living in China, I was teaching at the university from 95 to 99. And, of course, I lived there 4 years. I got to be friends with a lot of different people. And I got to be friends with this one professor who was a brilliant, he was not your typical Chinese professor. He was gregarious. He was outgoing. He laughed. He told crude jokes. He played tennis. I played tennis with him. And I would play tennis with him and some Pakistani students.
Okay.
And this was during the time, of course, Clinton was president at the time, and there was this big uproar that Pakistan was sending scientists to China to train. They were teaching them stuff, and there was a big controversy.
Okay.
We were criticizing, and they were denying it. It was like, I'm playing tennis with these guys. Should I be playing tennis with these guys? I don't know, but I was like, yeah, these guys exist. They're here studying.
Oh,
and
wow.
This person who just texted me was one of their instructors. He was teaching them jet propulsion and stuff like that. Control systems and all. She's a brilliant person.
There you go. So
she's somebody who became a Christian, and I had the opportunity to teach her some things and encourage her in her faith, and but she loved C.S. Lewis, and she's. I have a hard time understanding some of C.S. Lewis's writings. I mean, it's just some of it is just so thick. I'm just like, wow. But she loved C.S. Lewis, and she grew a lot in her Christian faith through C.S. Lewis. Well, that's her third language is English. I say that to just say how brilliant this lady is. I think her second language was French, and then English was her third language. But yet she can sit there and decipher C.S. Lewis and understand what he's saying.
Wow.
Brilliant person.
Wow.
That's
really cool.
Interesting little side note.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you, we talked a little bit about your missions trips and man, the efforts that you're putting forth, you and your organizations are putting forth to just impact the people there. That's admirable in and of itself. I want to ask you your opinion, your take on foreign missions. Like when you take an assessment of the landscape of foreign missions, like from here, from America, and you look at, okay, this church is doing that and that church is doing this. What do you think? Do you think that I know that individually you're doing all that you can, but as a church body, what do you think? Do you have an opinion about that? Is that something that you would be like, we're not doing enough, or interestingly, I know some people that send missionaries even to America. Mm-hmm. They're like, America needs saving, or whatever that looks like. Yeah. Is there an overall opinion about the state of foreign missions?
Well, there's always more that can be done, and there's always more that needs to be done. And we have done, I would say that American foreign missions has become, well, it has kind of gone down in recent years. I know a lot of the larger denominational mission boards have had great reductions in their budgets, and so you've had a lot of people that have been pulled off the fields. You've had countries that are considered closed countries like China and North Korea and Middle Eastern countries that would be considered closed countries, that it's become much more difficult to be in there. Although I do know people that are in countries like Iran and Iraq and doing wonderful works. I have a friend who's doing crusades in Pakistan. And he doesn't live there, but he goes in and does crusades, and it's just phenomenal. They had a crusade about a month to 6 weeks ago, and had like 150,000 people receive Christ.
Wow!
In that one crusade, and he just flew in, did the crusade, and flew back out, and has an armed security team with him and all that. I think there is a ramping up of people who are wanting to fund the presentation and the dissemination of the gospel. People that I talk to, there's a lot more people that are really kind of making a push for spreading the gospel as much as possible in these last. A lot of people consider these the last days biblically, just based on what you see happening around the world, and there's always more that can be done. I think the church in America is quite complacent because we're so comfortable, because we have so much. The church in China is undergoing a great persecution right now. There's been hundreds of pastors that have disappeared, whether they're dead or they're in work camps. We don't really know, or they've been used for organ harvesting. We don't know. But there are hundreds of pastors that have just disappeared, and it's not just the persecution is not just Chinese church. I mean, there's over 1 million Muslims that have been put into work camps over the last.
So they're non-discriminate against any type of person that's religious.
It's power and control. It all comes back to power and control. It's anything that they view that could be a threat to their power and control.
And how so? Let's dwell on that for a second. How did they get to that? I mean, okay, so how did they get to that point where there's become such a paranoid government? How did China get to a point where so we helped them out against Japan in World War II. I think England was established there, United States was established there, and the Soviet Union was established there. Mm-hmm. How did the Soviet or the socialist or the communist ideology take foothold over something like, let's say, in Japan, where it's real business oriented, and South Korea, is real free, and they have similar freedoms and democracy and things like that. How did they get to why did they become so paranoid?
Well, that's a long answer.
Okay, then. But
cultural. I mean, if you look historically, it's a country that has a history of 6,000-7,000 years. There's always been tribalism. There's been overlords or warlords that controlled certain parts, and then you had the first emperor, and I'm blanking on his name right now, who came in and basically united the country. And this was hundreds of years ago, actually thousands. And he united the country. Then you had the period of the dynasties. Where you had emperors, the dynastic rule of emperors, and the people were basically subject to the whim of the ruler, whoever that was. And so their concept, and I say this because their concept of rule of law is so much different than ours. We have this very strong view that everybody is subject to law. We see examples of that not happening. We see corrupt issues and all that. But in general, everybody plays under the same system of law, and law kind of sits above people as how we operate. Chinese don't view it that way. It's the emperor sets the law, and the people have to follow that. And whatever the emperor says the law is, that's the law. And so you had the emperor systems, and then you had the whole thing that, everything that happened with Japan coming in, and you had Sun Yat-sen at the turn of the 18th or 19th century. Sun Yat-sen was really, and he's revered even among the communists because he was taking China out of that emperor system into more of a republic.
Okay.
And he was apparently, from what I've read about him, he was a Christian man.
From the 19th into the 20th. Yeah, because didn't he come? He studied in the United. Is this the?
Yeah, I think he did.
The turn of the last century, right?
The turn of not
from the
not
19th to the 20th.
Not from 19 to 20, but from 1800s to 1900s.
Okay. Yeah, I read somewhere. I did a little bit of research, and I remember reading that he had come to the United States and studied or something like that, and didn't necessarily want to bring full-on democracy like we had it here, but liked the idea of a Congress, liked the idea of a Senate, and liked some of the things, and wanted to take that back, which actually is essentially Greek, but and he took it back, and and he was attempting to kind of create some type of a version of a republic in China. I mean, they even had at that point when he was in power, they even had things like the Boy Scouts over there, and there was much more of a Western influence coming in, which the Chinese have resisted and have accepted and resisted at different times. They've kind of had this love-hate relationship with the West, with Western ideology and culture and all of that. I say all this, and then you also have to realize that hundreds of years ago, you have the Confucianist thought permeates all of Chinese culture. And Confucius was a brilliant man. I mean, he didn't even call himself a religious figure. He wasn't divine.
He was a cultural figure.
Okay.
And he created a lot. His philosophy created a lot of basically the Chinese culture. And he was brilliant in how he did that. He would have these philosophical ideas, and then he would break that down into like a 3-character phrase. And they would teach that to all the kids. The kids would learn these little 3-character phrases. And so you can memorize 3-character phrases. But it had a concept behind it, a philosophical concept. And it spread throughout the country. And that still, even today, serves as a lot of the basis of Chinese culture. Although the communists have done an effective job of eradicating a lot of that because they stopped teaching it back in the 40s and 50s because it didn't agree with what Chairman Mao was trying to do. It didn't agree with his ideology, but so you had Sun Yat-sen was trying to make these changes, and he, by all accounts that I've read and studied of him, he seemed to be a very decent man, a guy that I would respect, but he died of cancer, and Chiang Kai-shek took over, and Chiang Kai-shek's government, the Kuomintang, it became quite corrupt. And so then you had this ideology, this Marxist ideology started coming in, and people like Mao Zedong started studying this. He was an educated man. He studied it in college, and he saw the problems with what was going on with Chiang Kai-shek's government, and the communist revolution started in the mountains down in south central China. I can't remember the exact province. I've actually been to the area where it started, and so it kind of started from there. And it started as an uprising of people, and they were able to, during World War II, the communists and the Chiang Kai-shek's troops, they fought the Japanese together, along with us and the Russians, but they fought together, and then they turned on each other. But excuse me. They turned on each other afterwards, and then you had the Communist Long March, but during that Long March, I mean, it was a march that was extraordinarily deadly, but they were able to turn the hearts of the peasants. By peasants, that's a term that the Chinese use, is peasants. It's your farmers, your uneducated people. They call them peasants. It's not a derogatory term. It's just a term that the Chinese use, and they were able to turn the hearts of the farmers, the common people, the peasants, to their cause, because communism was
very charismatic. Promising
all of these things, much like what we're seeing today in some cases. We're going to take care of you. We'll make sure that you're taken care of. It was the iron rice bowl theory of, from birth to death, we're going to take care of you.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah,
Very familiar.
and so they were able to create a movement there, and that then eventually they were able to defeat Chiang Kai-shek's troops, and then the remnants of the Kuomintang moved. They escaped to Taiwan, and American soldiers helped to evacuate as many of them as possible.
Okay.
And Walt Fleming, he was there. He was on the boats. He was a boat driver and helped to evacuate Chiang Kai-shek's troops. You ought to talk to him sometime. He's still living. He lives in New Braunfels. But he was there.
Yes, let me write that one down.
Walter Fleming. He was there. He was on the boats, and he said, as they pulled off with the last load, there were people that they had to leave on the beach, and you heard the machine gun fire, people getting wiped out.
Oh my gosh!
As they were going out and taking people over to Taiwan.
Wow! Just mass street executions. Just let the bullets fly.
The last fighting, and then that's how the communists took over. And so the communist system basically replaced the emperor system. The Chinese were used. I say all of that in as short as I could, to say that the Chinese kind of just fell into submitting to the communist system, in part because they were used to something similar to that with their emperors. They weren't used to, they didn't have any history of democracy or voting or elections or civil rights. They didn't have any history of that. Their history was that of the emperors, that of being ruled and told what to do by a monarch. Mm-hmm. And now the Communist Party basically, in essence, just kind of replaced that monarchy and became the organization. It was a multitude of people that are telling people what to do. But
cold turkey government,
yeah,
almost.
So you already kind of had this mindset.
Wow.
And so for the Chinese, and people say, well, why can't the Chinese just throw off these chains of communism? It would be getting rid of centuries of habit, or centuries of what they have experienced. They've never experienced a democracy. Mm-hmm. They've never experienced that. They don't even know what it would be. And in the last 15, 20 years, they have experienced more economic freedom.
Sure.
And you've seen the excesses come in very quickly.
So a division of status of people based on income?
Yeah. You see, the communist system,
like extreme capitalism kind of thing, like the bad parts of capitalism.
Extreme capitalism, but a lot of crony capitalism.
Oh, that's not good.
Which is the problem that we have here today.
Yeah.
We have crony capitalism here, which is the big problem. Capitalism in and of itself, if you have a set of rules that everybody follows, and you have the government being the official, making sure that it's fair, capitalism is wonderful, because a fair market system where you have competition, creates better products, better services, lower prices, better service after the sale. You can't get that from a communist system or a socialist system where the government is deciding what is going to be produced. No, you got to have a market-based decision-making process.
Okay.
We are providing a product that somebody wants, somebody needs. The communist system was that, we're going to create this pot. If you want a pot to cook in, you got to buy this pot. Well, that pot's this big. I don't want that big. I want it this size. Well, we don't make that size. Okay, so I'll buy this pot. You just get whatever is provided.
Yeah.
Whereas the free market competition-based system under fair rules, it's a beautiful thing because it drives the price down. And I saw that happen in the last 15 to 20 years in China. There was a company called Haier, Haier, and they sell products in America now They do air conditioners, refrigerators, and things like that.
Right. Okay. I've seen that brand.
They were one of the first companies in China to really grab a hold of customer service and service after the sale. And they prospered as a result, because what would happen, you would buy something in China and it was just junk. And then you'd call and try to get some customer service, and you'd have somebody over there that had no motivation to really help you, because it's all, it's state owned. They don't really care. They get paid the same amount, whether you're happy or not, whether you buy another product or not, they don't care. And Hi-R came in and they started making refrigerators and air conditioners, for those wall units, European style wall units and all. And I remember. See,
here I am thinking that that was a European brand.
Yeah, no, it's a Chinese brand.
Wow.
Hi-R is a Chinese brand. And I bought Hi-R because I heard that maybe they had better customer service. So I bought some air conditioners from them for my apartment. And I had a little issue. Something was leaking. I call them up. Same day, they send somebody out and fix it. No charge.
Wow.
I was amazed.
You don't get that from American companies.
Yeah. And well, they were overdoing it because they were really trying. And they just blew up. I mean, they became a huge company very quickly because they were providing great service after the sale, and then their prices weren't bad. They were a little bit more.
So, okay. All right.
They were a little bit more, but it was completely worth it because you could actually get somebody to come out, service your machine they would honor the warranty. They actually had warranties. So they would honor it. They would repair it. And you didn't have to go through all of these steps and all of this hassle and
terms of service and you agreed to have us, all these crazy things.
So anyway, fair capitalism is a beautiful thing, but crony capitalism is what kind of came into place in China, and still is there. And you also have to understand that just about every joint venture in China has a party member involved.
Okay.
One of the partners in there is a member that is tied into the. So
then, would you state that or say that the paranoia that we have seen recently in the news and things like that is it's a byproduct of just like corrupt communism or corrupt socialism?
I would say it goes deeper than that, and this was a point that I hadn't gotten to yet, but the because I forgot.
That's okay. That's okay.
I got carried away with something else.
No, that's cool,
but
man.
The paranoia comes from centuries. They've been, and some of it is understandable. You had things.
Is
like
it built into the culture or something?
Well, no, it was historical. They still have great resentment for the British through opium trade and through trade and through kind of back when the Chinese invented gunpowder, but they used it for firecrackers and things like that. They didn't use it for weaponry.
Uh-huh.
And the British used it for weaponry and were able to control parts of China at different times.
Wow.
That's how they got control of Hong Kong. And so they were able to force trade on China back in the 1800s. And they were able to, during their colonial expansion, they didn't ever really take over China, but they were able to force certain things through kind of gunboat diplomacy type situations. And that's kind of how they were able to get Hong Kong away for the 99-year lease.
Yeah.
And, of course, they developed Hong Kong incredibly like they would, like any kind of more of a free market.
How big is Hong Kong geographically?
Geographically, it's probably not any bigger than San Antonio, I don't think. You've got the main Hong Kong island, and then you have in southern China you have a peninsula that kind of sticks down. It's called Kowloon. And then you have new territories. You have a border between mainland China, and then you have the new territories, which is mostly farmland. There's some subdivisions there, but it's mostly where they get a lot of their agricultural products. And then you have Kowloon, which is kind of the tip of the peninsula, there's a lot of hotels, a lot of businesses, a lot of high-rise buildings. Uh-huh. And then you've got the harbor, and then on the other side you have Hong Kong Island. And Hong Kong Island it's a mountainous thing. So you've got you have the central, which is Hong Kong Central. You've got it's a concentration of high-rise buildings right along the the water there, right along the harbor. And then you have some apartment buildings kind of built up in the mountains, and you have some individual homes up there. You've got this beautiful lookout tower that you can see the whole harbor from. You can take a bus up, or you can take a tram up. But then you have some outlying islands as well. You have Lantau Island, which is the largest island.
Okay, so where are we at?
Okay, this would be central.
This right here would be central Hong Kong.
That would be what's called central, and that would be Hong Kong Island. And
Wow, that's beautiful.
yeah, it's amazing. And then on this side of the harbor is what would be Kowloon, which is the mainland. Like you can take that tram up to this lookout tower,
Okay.
and you can see the whole that. So this is Kowloon.
This right here is Kowloon. This in the background
Yeah, and then that would be New Territories, and going on
into mainland.
mainland China.
Okay.
And
This
so
tram and this place. What is that on Hong Kong Island?
that's Hong Kong Island.
This is what we're on. Okay.
Yeah, and then you have the backside of Hong Kong Island, which is quieter. There's like a farmer's market there. There's fishing villages. There's housing developments on the backside of Hong Kong Island. But then you also have Lantau Island, and you have a couple of others. There's one island that's a prison. There's Lantau Island, which is the largest island. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. That's good.
You've got Lantau. That's the largest island, and this is where they built the new airport.
This is the new airport area. All right. So Hong Kong Island, that tram would be right about where?
Where the words Hong Kong are.
Okay.
Right
Oh
around
yeah,
there.
yeah. So the city was there, and then we were talking about this goes into mainland. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and so then you have a bunch of other little. Geographically, I guess it would be big. It'd probably be about the size of Bexar County, I guess.
Okay. Bear County, Texas. That is.
Bexar County, Texas,
All right.
or Bexar, as people that aren't from here would say.
Bejar.
So
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, I don't think I've taken a good gander at Hong Kong ever.
yeah, if you've
that's
never been, you got to go sometime.
Yeah.
I really like Hong Kong. We used to go down to Hong
That's-
Kong. When I was teaching at the university, we'd go to Hong Kong for during the Chinese New Year time, which is it's like their Christmas time. You know, they take off. You get 4 to 6 weeks off from school during that time. It's in late January, early February. We'd go down there, get out of the harsh Beijing winter, and go down to Hong Kong.
Well, definitely, man. Let's do it. I'm totally down to go and experience that for myself. That would be really interesting.
When I fly to Vietnam, I usually fly through Hong Kong, because you can fly from LA to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to Vietnam is Ho Chi Minh City is only a couple hours.
Wow. That's gorgeous. That's really
But
gorgeous.
anyway, the British were able to secure Hong Kong from the fairly weak emperor, and the Chinese have always resented that. So you had different rebellions, like the Boxer Rebellion, which was a rebellion against Western influence on China back in the late 1800s, and
that was literally Boxer. When was that? So I remember watching a movie
the Boxers were a group of Chinese people that were against the Western influence, I believe.
they weren't. Forgive
They
my
weren't like
severe
physical
ignorance.
boxers. No, I don't
that,
remember exactly where that name came from.
Yeah,
but
that was
they
really
were-
bad on my part.
they were kind of anti-Western, if I remember right.
Okay.
But there, during that time, then there was coalition of countries. I think there were six or seven countries that went into China to kind of force them to do the things that they wanted to do. It had a lot to do with trade, but there was a palace, one of the emperor's palaces in Beijing, that was burned to the ground, and stone walls were knocked down and all, and it's still, they left it. The Chinese government left it.
Left the burnt remains.
They left it. They left the remains, and it's in northwestern Beijing. It's in the university district.
It's still there.
And it's still there. And I went and visited it with some of my students when I was teaching at the Aeronautics University. We went and visited it, and they take all of their cadet class military recruits. They take all of their cadets to that destroyed palace and educate them on that, teaching them never again will we allow this to happen. And so they don't forget, and they're constantly concerned about outside influence. They're like, as a teacher, that's it right there, the old summer palace. Yeah, Yunmingyuan.
So this is the original one. No, that's still destroyed too. Looks destroyed, but this is it.
Yeah, the old Yunming. It's called Yunmingyuan, and it's real close to the Tsinghua University and Beijing University, which are the top two universities.
Wow, I can't imagine how beautiful this would have been, even in its current state. It looks, it's very, I guess, romantic. I guess that's a bad description, but it looks like the architecture and the craftsmanship and the artisanship of this looks.
Oh yeah, the Chinese were amazing. They invented a lot of things, and the communist system, the communist educational system, has destroyed a lot of their creativity. But they were some of the most creative people ever.
And that's what irks me when I see, I understand you having an ideological stance on a certain thing, but when I see ancient artistic things just destroyed, granted it might be to a false god or whatever, but that's painful for an artist to see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that paranoia continues today.
Yeah, and it's
actually more evolved now because they have the technology.
Yeah.
And we started talking about this new. It's a scoring system for its citizenry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of this has been digitized now. They've been doing it for decades.
With the paper thing that we talked about earlier, yeah.
Like when I was at the university, I was watched a lot because they were very concerned about teachers and the influence that we had on our students. Because culturally and historically, Chinese,
they were starved for ideas.
Well, they respect their teachers so much.
Okay, I see.
And they in some cases they'll call their teachers or like their mother and father. I mean, it's like a second parent for them, and they really honor and respect you. And it's a wonderful thing. You go over as a teacher, and it's just. You are held up on this pedestal.
Revered almost.
And you are revered. And if you do a good job, they will love you and they will do anything in the world for you. I was there. As a side note, I was there when one of our spy planes collided with one of their fighters.
Right, I remember that.
And that happened, and that was a real tense moment. I was there when we inadvertently had 3 missiles hit the Chinese embassy in, was it Chechnya, I think it was, or... Croatia, or I can't remember where it was. That was during the Clinton administration, and then the other one was, I guess they were both during the Clinton administration. Both of those, there were lots of protests that took place. My students did things to make sure that I understood that they didn't blame me and that they were going to protect me and make sure that I was okay.
Wow, that's cool.
Just because they respected me and they loved me, and I mean, they took me out to dinner. The night we found out about the embassy getting bombing, they took me out to dinner. We had a great time.
It was like wow. Let me pause there because that's like, okay, this is happening. Let's make sure that our mentor understands that we don't feel that towards him, and let us honor him so that he understands. Hey, we know that this is going on over here in this area, but we don't throw you into that crowd. We could take a really good lesson on that. Like when we talk about like just social injustices, and we see a certain demographic of people that are being, it wouldn't really hurt if we took our black friend or whatever and say, hey, look, let me take you out to dinner, bro. I've been hearing, but I just want to know that I am empathetic towards towards the people of color plight, and I respect you. I want you to know where I stand and how much that's amazing. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Well, that morning I'd walked into class, and of course everybody had found out about it the night before. And I walked into class. I was like, this is going to be an interesting class. I want to see what, and the look on their faces, they were distraught. They were upset, justifiably so. They were upset. Three Chinese journalists, I believe, died in that
bombing or whatever it is.
It was so apparently it was unintentional, but you never know. That's information that I don't know.
That's above our pay grade kind of thing.
Whatever happened, it happened, and 3 people died. 3 Chinese people died, and so I walked into class and I said, I'm just gonna face this head on and deal with it and see what they want to do. And so I closed my book. I walked into class, I greeted them, closed my book, and I said, I know you all know what happened. Do you want to talk about it? What do we need to do? And they said, no, we don't want to talk about it. We're upset, we're angry, but we're not angry with you. Let's have class. We're here to learn English. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we did that, and then after class, they said, we want to take you to dinner. So we went to dinner that night and really had a wonderful bonding time.
Man, it
was a beautiful time. It was really, really sweet. And these were
beautiful.
You have to understand, my students were not undergrad or grad students. They were postgrad. Most of them already had their doctorate, and some of them had 2 or 3 doctorates. Wow. These were aeronautical engineers. These were electrical engineers. These were a lot of government officials. I had a lot of party members.
Okay.
They were part of their government. And some of them were professors from the university. Some of them were in the industry, the aeronautical or astronautical industry. They were working for airlines. They were working for the Ministry of Aviation or whatever the title is for that. So these were people that were older than me. Most of them were in their 40s and 50s. In fact, I had one of my first students was the top astrophysicist in all of China. Brilliant guy. He would travel the world and go to different, what are they called? The planetariums or where the big telescopes are, whatever that thing is called.
Yeah, planetariums.
And so he was a brilliant guy. He couldn't speak English to save his life, but he was a brilliant man. But anyway, these are people that are involved with their own government. These aren't just kids. And so they had the means, one, to take me out to eat, but they were just so grateful. And I say this to say that, or to make the point of how much they honor and respect their teachers. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that has changed. I've been out of the country now. I haven't been teaching there for about 7 years now, 7 or 8 years. And so I'm not really sure exactly what it's like now. Things kind of change, and there has been a lot of influence from the West and from other parts of the world that has kind of changed attitudes in China. But I think for the most part, they still very much honor and respect their teachers. And so as a result, I was under watch almost all the time. And I had people that at that point, they didn't have all the cameras. They didn't have facial recognition. They didn't have the AI technology. They would physically have to have somebody follow me. And so they would monitor. You were tailed the whole time you were there. Yeah, they would monitor who came in and out of my apartment. They had people that lived around me that would monitor, who came there, because like the stairwell had windows, and so you could see when somebody would stop at my door, and there was apartments across the way, and there was a lady downstairs who monitored things, who monitored who went up and down the apartment where the foreigners lived, and so I'm sure that they had reports, and I felt a little bit more freedom at my university because the students didn't have to actually sign in when they came in to visit me at my apartment. And I'd have students over all the time to come and practice English. I had an open door policy. They could come and if they had questions, and we'd just go through the lessons and talk. And sometimes I'd go to their dormitories at night and just sit in the dorms and talk with them. And because they were coming there because they wanted to speak with a native English speaker. Mm-hmm. And so even though I was monitored all the time, I did have the freedom to speak with them and practice English with them. And it was an opportunity that I had to influence them, which is what they were always concerned about. But it was an opportunity that I had with them just for that period of time, because once they went back to their jobs, I typically wasn't allowed to be in contact with them anymore because of their positions.
Right.
But that was all monitored, and you kind of, you learn to use reflections, in glass and all. You can kind of see who's following you, and then after a while, you kind of you kind of become adept at that. You
picked up these skills.
Yeah, you just kind of pick up
that
these skills.
That guy's been following me for the last 2 blocks.
Yeah,
kind of
the
thing.
same person, here and there, and they would switch off, but you just kind of get an idea, and then they would learn your patterns after a while, and then they wouldn't even have to follow you necessarily. They would see.
Did you ever play any games with them? Like
on occasion, there's things you kind of backtrack, and turn around real fast, and somebody's looking at you. What? Sometimes you get some looks like
I'd be horrible. I'd probably be doing that every day. Yeah,
it was fun on the one hand. It was frightening on another hand. But you just kind of get used to it after a while. It just becomes part of your life that you just assume. You assume that your phone is tapped. I got my first email address in China. Email just had come out. I didn't have it here.
Mid to late 90s.
Yeah. I think it was 96 or 97 when I got my first email address, and it was through the China Telecom, and so I knew that was all monitored, and whether or not they could, encryption and all that stuff I didn't really understand all that, so I don't. Whether they could actually get in and get it, I didn't know, but I knew that they could at least store it and they could go back and get it later.
Maybe, like now I've seen machines that are able to retro search.
Yeah.
Like GeoCities and things like that, and identify, archived websites and things like that. Like everything's permanent now. You know, it's like, and even if you delete something, the edit stays in some archive somewhere.
Yeah,
where supercomputer AI can.
Yeah,
And
so now with all the technology that they have, I think pretty much everything that we would have. They have AI. They have the. And I'm saying this as a person who's ignorant to all this stuff. They're utilizing AI, they're utilizing facial recognition, they're installing 200 million cameras nationwide, and these are factual
all for the sake of the safety. People. They're clear. Yeah. Like there's they say that the UK is a surveillance state, but they do it to help cut down on crime or whatever. They spin it however they want to spin it, but China's not. Hiding anything. They're saying, no, we're monitoring people. They
are, and they do.
Openly.
In fact, I read an article about a young Chinese lady who really loves the system, and she knows that it's monitoring, but she likes it because it creates safety and stability and da-da-da-da. Well, all that's propagandized. They've done a masterful job for years of
they're masters of spinning it.
I don't want to say brainwashing, but basically getting people to believe what they want them to believe. And it's all propaganda. I mean, they control the media. They control basically all forms of communication, television, print, now internet, radio. Everything is censored. Everything is combed through. Everything is monitored.
You couldn't do a podcast like this in China.
You could, unless you'd have to do it underground, and there are underground things going on. There's a lot going on, but they are really clamping down on all that right now. Yeah, it would be hard. You'd be hard pressed to do it. Now, in the last 15 to 20 years, before the current president took over, he took over in 2012. Before that, things had really started to open up, and there was a lot of freedom. There, people would do things like this, and you could get away with it. Now what they're doing is they're going back and they picked up a lot of those people. Yeah. And so they've created a social media, Facebook is still banned. Google's still banned, blocked. You can't get to it unless you use a VPN. And I just have talked to a friend of mine not too long ago, just a few days ago, said that VPNs are getting much more difficult there because they see a VPN, they see this tunnel that they can't get into, and they immediately go
and attack that tunnel
and try to stop it or try to get into it. And so they're constantly going after that. So you kind of have to constantly change things, but it's getting more and more difficult to use VPNs over there. So they're utilizing the technology to enable themselves to create these behavior scores, the social behavior
scores.
And I think the point.
Listen to that very carefully.
I think the point total is like 1,000 And if you have
like a credit score,
700 to 800, you're considered to be a good,
citizen.
good citizen, and you get benefits from it. You might get, you get the ability to buy airplane tickets. You get the ability to travel. You get the ability to, get benefits,
Better housing, maybe
a better housing. Simple as getting
better insurance
tickets, or being able to even just simple things like going out for entertainment. Getting a better seat at a
venue of some
performance, or something like that. But if you have a low score, then they start taking things away from you, like you won't be able to buy an airplane ticket. And I know somebody who this happened to. He didn't realize he had, back when a couple years ago, when the Chinese central government voted to allow the president to serve more than 2 terms, because it's always been a 2-term thing for the last 30 years or so. Actually, I think it's been longer than that. But anyway, they voted to allow him to serve more than 2 terms, which basically has given him the ability to be president for life if he wants, and if he can maintain his coalition, if he can maintain his supporters.
Wow.
There were a lot of people that protested against that. A lot of people that spoke out, and this guy that I know, he spoke out against it in social media. And
now they're like Enoch,
he didn't
no longer were.
He didn't get a visit or anything, but he's a businessman. He had to go down, I think, down to Guangzhou, down south and he was trying to buy an airplane ticket. Couldn't get a ticket. Couldn't figure out, why can't I get a ticket? It's not a high travel time. I mean, there's certain times of the year where nobody can get a ticket. It's just Chinese New Year is hard to travel, but he couldn't get a ticket, and he finally did some investigation on it, because the airlines wouldn't sell him anything. There's a C-Trip is a company it's like a Travelocity type thing, or Expedia, and he couldn't buy anything through any of those services. Finally did some research and figured out that he had gotten himself blacklisted,
flagged, huh?
Yeah, and so they weren't allowing him to travel.
How long ago was that?
It was
recently, or
last year. It was just
wow.
It was probably spring of last year. And
is that mine or yours?
Yeah, that's mine. So it was the spring, I believe, of last year, because it happened.
Is that when it became more prevalent obviously the paranoia and the control has been there for decades, but this social behavior score, that's about when you started to learn about it?
Well, they have kind of reinstituted it in a way. I think you've always had some form of that within China,
but now with the technology,
you couldn't. Back even in the early 90s, when I first went there, 1990, students, like if a student got pregnant at the university, both the girl and the guy were immediately kicked out of school. They couldn't finish college. So you had very low pregnancy rates among college students, because that was,
probably high abortion rates too, huh?
And that as well. And they have a lot of abortion in China even today, because there's they don't allow a mother to get an ultrasound, because
they don't want her to know if it's a boy or if it's a girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or if it's defective, or has a defect.
So they still have. Is that a thing? One child rule?
Well, one child policy was in effect from the 70s until about 4 or 5 years ago, and they've now increased it to 2. Now your minorities, there's 56 recognized minority groups within China. 56. The minority groups have always been allowed to have more than one child, because they make up about 7% of the population. The Han Chinese make up about 93% of the population, approximately. Your farmers, if farmers, your peasants, if they had a girl first, in some cases they'd be allowed to try to have a boy, because the belief was that the boy would be able to provide more work. But like if you're a party member, or if you're living in a city, it was very strictly enforced, and it was monitored with these neighborhood watch people. You weren't allowed to get married without permission from your work unit.
You weren't allowed to have a child without permission from your work unit. And if you did, you might be forced to have an abortion if you got pregnant without permission. Or if you got married without permission, you might lose your socialized medicine privileges or your social system privileges. You might, if you chose to get married and didn't get the proper permission for it, you might end up having to pay fines the rest of your marriage because you went outside of the system. Or you might lose your job, or you might, your child might not be allowed to go to the certain schools unless you pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
You might not be able to access the hospitals unless you pay a lot of money. I mean, very, very controlling. And it had loosened up in the 2000s, 2010s. And then, but now they're kind of clamping it back down again. It's kind of getting back to what it was in the early 90s and even earlier than that. But now there's even greater control because they have the technology to be able to do it. It used to be you could enter the country in Beijing through the airport and get flagged for something. And then you leave the country and you could go to Hong Kong and enter the country from Hong Kong, and they didn't have the computer systems tied together where they would notice it necessarily. It's all tied together now, and so they're highly effective at it, and it's kind of spooky the amount of monitoring that they do with everybody. You walk outside and they know where you are. They've always been able to, and I even heard this back when cell phones first became prominent and prevalent in China. I got my first cell phone probably around early 2000s, and it was in China. And even back then, they would say, you had to, if we were going to have a meeting or if we were going to, have a gathering of friends, everybody take your batteries out of your phones. Because they can tell how many people are in that room or in that building just by checking the batteries. They had
the heat sensors and stuff like that, or
well,
what?
They could drive by and they had certain devices that would it would read the batteries. You could see how many batteries are in there, or how many phones, how many cell phones, so they could see if there was a cluster of people in a room. And so we'd always have to take out our batteries. Plus then, they could turn on or they could listen. And they maybe even be able to listen right now. They could listen to your phone. They could, turn on your microphone and listen to what you're saying. And so we'd take batteries out of phones and all that. It was all kind of cloak and dagger kind of stuff, but it was just life. It was just the way you had to live your life over there. And you just kind of understood that was what was going on. And it's back to that now, but it's kind of it's a system on steroids now, where it's even more prevalent and it's more invasive. Like I have an app on my phone. It's a WeChat app, and WeChat is probably the most popular social media app in China. But it was created by the Chinese government, so they've got backdoors to it. They can monitor everything.
Nothing's encrypted.
When you're in China, there's a financial component that you can attach your bank account to it, and you can use WeChat to pay for things. And so everybody loves it because it's so convenient. You go into a restaurant, you sit down, you order your food, and every table will have a QR code. So you just scan the QR code; it'll give you your bill. You can split the bill with, whoever's at the table, or you can just pay it and you walk out the door.
Sounds convenient. Like, that's so awesome. That's great.
If I want to buy this microphone from you, you have your own QR code. I scan it, I send you the money for it, and take the microphone. And that's our transaction. And so what people will do is they'll get money on that account, or on that WeChat app, and then they just pay for things with that. Even in the village that I lived in, because I lived in a farming village for 12 years, even the farmers now, it used to all be cash. You couldn't couldn't use your credit card to pay for that. But now they all have QR codes.
You mentioned to me,
And you can scan
Yeah.
the QR code. I even saw in Beijing.
Right,
The last time I was in Beijing, I was around one of these. I was at
nuts.
the wholesale market,
Uh-huh.
and beggars hang out around the wholesale market. I saw a beggar had a QR code that you could give him a donation, scan his QR code, and then give him a donation. I thought, this is crazy. But just think about the implications of that. I mean,
It's a precursor to something,
they
right?
could completely shut you down financially if your social behavior score isn't what they want it to be.
It reminds me of an episode of, I was telling you, this show called Black Mirror on Netflix, where that's exactly what was happening. It was, I mean, she was the main character was played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and she was like desperate to get to change her score for the better because she had some sort of run-in with one of her celebrity friends that dropped her score below a 4.0 or whatever, and now she's struggling to get back above that threshold so that she can live the standard of life that she was doing, and she was willing to do anything to get to that that score back.
Well, yeah, think about that, because that's something you talk about, the influence of your friends on your own score. This article
so who you associate with.
This article I was reading about this lady who loved the system. Her husband works for the government, so that gives her a great benefit. It gives her increased points. But if you have a friend, like you say, who does something wrong, that could reflect negatively on your score
unfriend.
and bring it down.
I'm unfriending you because my score is low.
Well, think about that. You could completely create this whole system of ostracizing people that
digitally.
Well, and in effect, and you can't have any contact with them anymore.
Wow.
You know, like was it Leah Remini does this thing, has been doing this series on Scientology, and then they did a thing on Jehovah's Witnesses and how they shun people.
They ostracize people, right?
Think about that on a worldwide scale. People being shunned just because I'm afraid that my interaction with you is going to bring my social behavior score down. Think about the implications of that. I mean, it's just... what are the unintended consequences going to be of all of that?
You create a caste system, a digital caste system.
You do, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
You know, you were talking about brainwashing and propagandizing, you know, the populace and stuff like that, and it just got me to thinking while you were talking about that, because there's a lot of blowback against Facebook, right? But I'm wondering now that I'm verbalizing this and you brought it to my attention. I'm wondering if the blowback that the government is trying to create against Facebook is because Facebook is 100% fully encrypted end to end on each phone. Like if you wanted to get into my Facebook, you actually couldn't because of the encryption level of it. And I'm wondering if all this, you know, there were some leaks and stuff like that, and I understand that, but I'm wondering if the blowing up of those incidents weren't to try to get into Facebook's encryption data to try to create something similar to like what China's doing. Because would that be? I wrote a point here in my show notes. Is like, do you think that could become a template for other countries?
I think it will.
You think it will be? Okay.
I think it'll be implemented worldwide eventually.
That's an interesting conversation. That's probably a whole nother conversation where we might even go into
I'm not a conspiracy theorist kind of guy. You see what's happening, you see what's going on, and I also look at it based biblically. You know,
eschatology,
mark of the beast, and all of that kind of thing. And
okay,
I think it's going to happen. I think it's just at some point, it'll happen. We'll get there.
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting day.
It will be.
We probably should. I should probably have you back to talk about eschatology, because do you like that kind of?
I do.
You like that? I had a really great mentor, teacher, when I was at Raymond Bible College, and he loved end times and all that stuff, and he was really into that. Now, we didn't necessarily see eye to eye. I'm what you would call a partial preterist, but the point is that he had some interesting takes, like you, on technology and the effect that it'll have in the end time play of things. Yeah. So you're thinking that, yeah, is that a personal belief, or you even see that just happening?
I just see it happening.
So it's not even. So you hold the position biblically, spiritually speaking, the idea of it, but you're actually in it, and you're experiencing it unfold before your eyes.
I'm seeing it happen. Yeah, on a daily basis, I'm seeing it happen. Yeah.
Is there anything that us there's no holding it back, I don't think, in time.
No, I don't think so.
So is there anything that you would say that you could do now to, I don't even uninstall, get rid of smartphones and just go live
well, there's that. Yeah. You
can go live out in the woods,
you can unplug
off the grid
completely. But then you have to be careful what kind of products that you buy, because these days products are have chips in them and things like that.
Everything is starting to be tracked.
Yeah.
Somebody opened up a phone. I don't want to say it was the iPhone. It was maybe one of those, just an Android, but they opened it up and every chip had a QR code on it.
Yeah.
Every chip in there had an identification,
Yeah.
like it was being it was being tracked.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
we know that this phone with this serial number has these chips in it, and we know that if we needed to peg it for whatever reason, we can identify you.
Well, they're even doing QR codes and RFID tracking with even poultry, and they
Are those little rice-sized chips?
Yeah. So the little radio frequency identification, I think, is what it is. A friend of mine was involved with a company in Beijing that was doing that, and they would, it's all in convenience, but
under the guise of convenience, right?
But you could put
Simplicity,
an
efficiency.
RFID code on every product. You could put all of those products on a pallet. They didn't have to be the same product, and then you can shrink wrap that pallet, put it on put it in a cargo container, and then put that container on a cargo ship it over to the States, and then you have these RFID readers.
Okay.
And they placed them about 20 feet apart, and you just push that
right through
that pallet through, and it would read everything on there. Well, they could do that with and they were doing
with
it
animals
for counterfeiting, because like in China, it's. You go to a store and you see, like, you go to a Rolex store, for example, and you see all these beautiful Rolexes. You don't really know if they're all genuine. Okay. And that could be anywhere in the world. I say China because that was my experience. But you don't really know if they're genuine. So what they were starting to do is at the factory, they would put an RFID code on, or maybe it's a QR code now. But they would put a tracker on there so that they could track it from the factory to the customer. So you could have a record to know that this is a genuine Rolex watch.
Okay, right.
It's not a fake. Because some of the fakes are really good. I've seen some really good. I've bought a couple of really good fake Rolexes.
I bought one good fake one back in 2004, and I took it to some experts, and they had the 7 crowns, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was made with a really high end alloy, and you had to actually open it up and look for the trademarks on the inside to tell that.
Yeah. I had one that worked beautifully for years. In fact, I was going to give it to somebody one time just as a joke, because they thought it was real. It's like, I'll just give it to you. Cost me $25. But anyway. But they were even doing that with the mad cow disease and the swine flu and the bird flu and all of that, where you would have, like in China, it happened just less than a decade ago, where you had large, just a whole lot of pigs had to be slaughtered because there was a swine flu outbreak, and they couldn't pinpoint where it came from.
Oh, okay.
So
I see where it's going. I see where you're going.
All these farmers lost everything, because they had to wipe out the whole
clean slate,
everything from that area. Well, now if you put an RFID tag on every pig, you can track where it comes from, and you can track.
Oh, it was this stock.
If there is a problem, then all you have to do is you can just take that out and just you can be more specific of basically removing the cancer, and you don't have to destroy the whole thing.
And how does that translate into how?
But now everything's being tracked. It's the same,
There's some really scary implications
there. Interesting implications of all that, and some of it's, it starts off with I think a lot of times it starts off with a good reason. You know, we want to improve our security, our safety. You know, even the cashless society people, they'll say, well, you know, if you're not carrying around cash,
Can't get mugged.
You can't get mugged. But okay, well, what if they attach that to your, I don't know, your thumbprint? You're gonna have an epidemic of people getting their thumbs chopped off.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen, or your, you know, retinal scanning or whatever. You know, if there's people will find a way. Bad people are going to find a way to cheat the system.
And that's I think that's ultimately the thing is like, let's not try to cure that, or let's not try to find I don't even know how to phrase this, but instead of attacking the attacking the core of the issue, they're trying to cover the symptoms and say, okay, well, you know, in order to prevent that, we're just going to do this and invade your privacy here. And it starts out with, like you're saying, I'm verbalizing this so I can get it. It starts out as efficiency, safety, and it's going to be great for society. It's going to move us forward, but it really just comes back down to just control.
And it comes back down to a heart issue.
Well, a heart issue.
You know, all of this stuff happening, you know, I don't fear it. I believe it's going to happen, and I think we're going to eventually get there, but I'm not afraid of it because of my faith in Christ.
Yeah, that's a good note. Good. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And so because of that, I believe that no matter what happens, however this plays out,
you're good.
My future is secured in Christ, because really, ultimately, we live on this earth for a very, very temporary period of time. It's a temporal period. I mean, it's a finite period of time, and it's a short period of time. No matter how long you live 120 years, it's still a short period of time in comparison to the rest of eternity. So having that eternal perspective of understanding, you know, my belief in Christ and my believing that he has made a way for us to live eternally with him, I'm not worried about how this is all going to play out. Because ultimately my faith is in him and is in that. And so I don't have to be fearful. I'm not afraid of what's going to happen. I get a little upset by it sometimes, a little irritated by it sometimes. But ultimately it's, you know, that faith in Jesus Christ that, you know, if you believe in your heart and you confess with your mouth, you're saved. And you will be saved regardless of what happens. You know, that's his promise to us. And so it's a comforting. Maybe some people would say, well, it's the opiate of the masses or whatever. But it's something that I believe fervently and strongly in my heart, that it's, you know, because of my faith in Jesus Christ, I don't have to fear what is coming and what is going to happen. Because, you know, people throughout history, people have been trying to gain control over other people, which doesn't really make sense to me, because I've never tried to gain control over anybody. I have a hard enough time just controlling myself.
Okay.
And you know, doing the right thing myself. I can't imagine trying to control everybody else, but there's people that are power hungry, and I believe that, you know, that Satan is out to steal, kill, and destroy us, steal from us, kill us, and destroy us. And so, you know, by living my life with that understanding of who Jesus Christ is and my faith and belief in him, I'm not really worried about what's going to happen.
And, you know, there's a lot of my acquaintances that are either atheist or agnostic, and not detracting from anything you're saying, and I don't even want to spin this in any other sort of way, as I believe that too. I believe in Christ. I think a lot of people tie religion into being a Christian, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Like there is corrupt Christians, there are corrupt churches, there are corrupt organizations that take advantage of people. But at its core, it's like what Gandhi said. He says, "I trust your Christ. It's your Christians I have a problem with."
Exactly, and that's the saddest statement I think
because it's so true.
Because and it's such
so
a beautiful thing, and it's, you know, and this is something, and probably be controversial, but You look at every religion in the world, including the Christian religion, it's all about what I can do to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what Christ said. Christ said there's nothing that you can do to make yourself good enough for God. It's what I am doing for you, and it's you receiving what I've done for you.
And that's it.
And that's it.
That's it.
Nothing added to it.
Like everybody talks about the different rules. We were talking in our first podcast about how Sharonica and I were raised, and how we were told to do this, told to do that, don't do this, don't do that. And a relationship with Christ is not about that. It's about now we get to do these things. We have this freedom because of what you did, not because. And so, in talking with my brother about, religion and stuff like that, because we were all raised in the same type of church, it's never been about these set of rules. It's about the freedom that's offered, because now let's tie this back into the conversation about China and the technology that's evolving to where it's control and social behavior scores and crazy surveillance and things like that. You have a peace of mind because you dwell on eternity. Your perspective is eternally minded as opposed to temporal minded, because even from a secular perspective, I can be a very good Christian and impact my community and whatnot, and leave what type of legacy I can. But when you're eternally minded, it's just a different way of just appreciating the gift that is this life.
Yeah. And then, it's a focus on not what I can get out of it, because that scripture that talks about you sell your soul to gain the world. What can I gain that I don't already have? Okay, I can get a nicer house. I can get a nicer car. Okay, big deal. It's going to last a little while. Everything that we buy is deteriorating.
Yeah.
The car that I drive, it's got to change the oils.
Only made to last.
Change the tires. Everything's deteriorating. It's just more trouble to deal with.
Yeah.
The eternal understanding of eternal salvation is something that's a beautiful thing, because it allows me to live my life in a relationship versus based on a bunch of rules.
Yeah.
Because the rules are basically man-made anyway.
Mm-hmm. I think what Christ, belief in Christ, and see, a lot of times I don't believe the things about Christianity because a pastor told me. I mean, sure, they have sermons that are beautiful and then they're well illustrated, but I don't believe those things because a pastor told me. I believe them because Christ said it. In history, in the Bible or whatever. And the thing that he offers, just like with anything, when you go to buy insurance, when you buy a car, when you buy a home, what do those things offer you? Those things offer you a peace of mind because I know I have a roof over my head. A car offers me a peace of mind because I know that if I needed to go somewhere, I can go. A job, I know that it offers me ultimately a peace of mind because now I know that I'm going to receive some sort of material resource that's going to help me with all these other things, food and all that stuff. So what you're ultimately seeking is peace of mind, and in your spirit, which we all have, that's what Christ offers us is a peace of spiritual mind.
And there's the salvation, receiving that salvation is a beautiful thing to have that, and to have, for me as somebody who believes the Bible to be God's word, it gives me that great peace. But then there's that next step of being a disciple, which we can be. And I believe, I heard a minister talking about this not too long ago. You can be saved, but not necessarily be a disciple.
Okay.
Not necessarily be a disciple of Christ, because being a disciple of Christ is you learn more and you want to live your life in a manner that is in accordance with what the scriptures say. And it's not living a life according to a bunch of rules, but it's living a life that would be, I guess, pleasing to God, but not pleasing in a controlling way, but pleasing because you are pursuing Him. You are pursuing that relationship with Him. It's about relationship. It's not about rules. It's about relationship. The rules were set there. In the Old Testament, the rules were established to show us that in and of ourselves, on our own, through our own ability, we can't keep all the rules.
Yeah, it's
You
impossible.
can't do it. It's impossible. If you break one rule, then you're done.
You're guilty of all of them.
Yeah, it's 100% or nothing.
Yeah. And so the rules were set up, as Christ said, the rules were set up to point to the fact that we can't meet up.
We need a savior.
Yeah.
So it's about relationship with him. And so, I live my life the way I live my life, not because I see a bunch of rules that I have to follow. I live my life the way I do because I want to have a closer relationship with my Creator, and I want to know him better. I want to know him more. I want to know Christ more, and I want to be more like him, because that is where the true prosperous life is going to come from. The more that I am engaged with him, the more that I know him, the closer I am to him, the better person I'm going to be, the happier I'm going to be, healthier I'm going to be. I'm going to make better decisions because of spending time with the Creator of the universe, the one who loves me so much that he sent his son for me. That's what it's about for me. It's understanding the eternal perspective, but then just trying to tap into understanding and learning and knowing him more.
Yeah.
Is where that development of relationship comes from.
And that, to bring that full circle, that's why you had such a heart for China in the early 90s, is you saw that you saw that need in in the people's eyes. You said when you were standing at the base of that tower, you saw that in
they had. I mentioned that for years they have historically been ruled by a group of people, whether it's an emperor or now a party, whatever, and they've. As a result, they placed their faith in that ruler. And that in 1990, when I was there, it was a year after Tiananmen Square happened, and part of what I saw in their faces and in their eyes was a great disappointment. They had been let down by their government.
By who they had revered almost divinely.
Yeah.
Because
Deng Xiaoping was somebody who was loved. He was in charge at the time.
Okay.
He was retired. He wasn't technically in charge, but he was in charge behind the scenes.
Yeah.
He made the call. But all of their faith had been placed in these people, in these individuals. And when we place our faith in people, we're always going to be disappointed, because none of us can live up to the promises that we make to other people. None of us can live up to anything,
right?
And they had placed their faith in these people who were their rulers or their leaders, and they had completely destroyed them. They had wiped out children.
It's interesting.
College students. I saw a picture not too long ago of a group of parents, a group of mothers, that had a picture of their child that was killed at Tiananmen Square.
Wow.
And still to this day, you don't know how many people were killed. Was it dozens? Was it hundreds?
Because they cleaned up.
They cleaned it up and they
Fast.
washed it up. And they don't study it in school. The kids today, the college students today, most of them, I saw some interviews with some of the kids today in China, and they've never heard about that.
Because it was the 30-year anniversary, right?
It was the 30-year anniversary this year. They don't know what the June 4th. What's the significance of June 4th? June 1st is Children's Day. What's the significance of June 4th? I don't know. That's International Children's Day is June 1st. And so
it's like they tried to cover it up with another holiday.
And so, no, that's always been
an
international thing.
Okay, I see.
But they know, that, but they don't know why. What's the significance? Why is security tightened now? We don't understand. What do you mean I can't search for certain things? And they just haven't taught it. And so there's a whole, probably from your 30s, maybe 35 on down, they don't know anything about it. They haven't been taught it.
That's how history repeats itself.
And that's how you get into a situation where you end up repeating history because you don't know it. And unfortunately, I think we've got a similar situation going on here. With I see interviews with college students today, and just the lack of knowledge that they have in our own history.
Yeah.
And then this campaign, and we're getting way off topic, but this campaign tearing down statues because, well, that guy was was for the South and the Confederacy and this and that. We need to study our history and know our history so that we don't do it again.
Well, just as a sidebar, just to comment on that, I think it is the public display of those. Like I think they just wanted to move them. I just wanted to just make sure that
some of them have been taken out completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that scares me when you want to take them out completely. It was like Eisenhower said at the end of World War II. He said, take pictures and video of all
the Holocaust, right?
Because if you don't, later on, some idiot's going to come along and say that never happened.
Right.
And we already see that happening today.
About the Holocaust is fake and things like that.
And it's just, if you don't like the history, well, let's just get rid of that. No, we need to study the history so that we don't repeat ourselves. We don't do it again. There's
an interesting quote that I heard, and I'm not going to say who it was by, so it's just unknown by me because I can't recall his name. But it was some guy was interviewing another gentleman, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more research because I want to be a little bit more well-versed in when I say something. But my point is that he said, the guy on his deathbed said, "We've been here before."
Yeah,
we've been here before, and it had to deal with the technology of the nuclear technology and stuff like that. And he said, "We've been here before." He said this, alluding to essentially that humanity has wiped itself out on several occasions, and it's because we don't learn from our history. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's nothing new, under the sun. There's
more poignance to that statement now that when in this context.
Yeah. Well, you look at, one of the things that I've studied theologically is Ephesus, the city of Ephesus. Mm-hmm. And why is there so much emphasis in the book of Ephesians on power, the power of God and all of that? And it's because the city of Ephesus was steeped in witchcraft and idolatry and sexual immorality of every kind that we see today.
Okay.
So it's not I say that because it's not something that hasn't happened before. A lot of times I think people say, well, this is a new thing. We're talking about transgenderism and we're talking about, homosexuality, LGBTQ and all this stuff. It's happened historically multiple times.
Because we people on the right specifically are like in outrage about some of the things that people on the left or LGBTQ plus, all that stuff. They're like, hey, this is whatever. This goes against my beliefs, and we'll have that discussion some other time, if at all. But when you look at historically the Bible, it's not even close to how bad it was there.
No, it's not. Not
even close. Like it was way worse during the time.
Cities were wiped out because of it.
And look at like Abraham and Lot and. When the angels are just some of the things that, be it as it may, take it literal or take it historical or take it metaphorically, the things that were happening at that time are just crazy. Again, this goes back to history repeats itself. And we are a society with amnesia.
I think that's one of the things that frustrates me the most is the things that I see happening right now.
Selective amnesia.
It is so obvious that this is happening again. Why? But not everybody has studied history, I guess.
That's I could literally talk another 2 hours, which is interesting because we've talked for well over 2 hours. I always wonder, how could you talk, and Joe Rogan and stuff like that, how could you talk for 3 hours, 4 hours, or whatever? And here we are having a great conversation about China, about surveillance and some of the things. And
I'm gonna go into hiding now.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I could still take you up on that trip to China here in a couple of years.
That whole protest in Hong Kong kind of makes me a little nervous because it's
the one that's happening right now. The extradition.
It's the extradition thing that they're trying to put in.
They reversed the decision because of the protests, and they said something like 7. I was watching a video and I had it pulled up, but just for the sake of time, essentially 70% of the populace came out and protested. So we're talking about millions and millions of people came to the streets and said no, and that tells you the power of the people. Because even in an area of control where that's where that's when 70% of the populace rises up against just something like the extradition law that they were trying to pass, or they passed it. I don't know.
No, they were trying to pass it, and
they reversed on it.
They haven't yet, but I will hold my celebration for now.
Okay.
The Chinese tend to ride out the storm.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back and do what they want to do.
We talk about 5-year plans here in the United States. They have 500-year plans in China.
Yeah.
And,
I've seen it happen too many times, where there's a big, massive outrage about something, and they can just ride it out. And we can do it here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
We've had situations where people should have been kicked out of office that weren't kicked out of office because they were able to ride out the media rush. 3 weeks later, everybody's attention turns to something else, and they were able to survive it. But,
yeah.
I'm a little skeptical about that.
Okay.
So,
yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on that.
I hope that it holds.
We'll keep an eye on it. And next time you're on the podcast, we'll see. We'll bring that up. We'll make show notes for that. But yeah, man. Hey, thank you, Neal, so much again for being here. I'm just really glad that out of the gates I had such an awesome guest like you. Remind us of your websites and what people can
Charities
do.
And
LegacyCharities.com
and newdaycharities.org.
Newdaycharities.org. Fantastic.
Shows the projects that we're working on, and
the great stuff that you're doing over there. Thank you so much again. Hey, everybody, just make sure that you like, you subscribe, you share, because these conversations are important to have so that we can be aware and help progress our community for to some positive. Thanks, man.
I appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate
what you're doing.
We're gonna do it.
It goes well for you.
Amen, as they say. And and everybody, that's the deal with China. Yeah.
Very small part of it, but yeah, there's a lot more.
Cool, man. All right.
I am by no means an expert. I've just what I've experienced.